Welcome back to our final thoughts on our series of Loving Well. As we wrap up this time together, we wanted to leave you with some final words and encouragement before it's just over. I appreciate you taking all these weeks with me.
All these weeks?
Weeks!
It's been a week. It's felt like weeks.
It's been forever.
We've been quarantined
Forever.
for days that feel like weeks.
That's right. 1 week. Thank you for doing this for a whole week with me.
Whole week, you bet.
Mm-hmm.
It's been fun.
Mm-hmm.
Which I say, meaning I'm good. We're coming to our final thoughts. We don't need to do this for a while, right?
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, here we go. So, as we get ready to wrap it up, we have a few closing thoughts for you to consider. This is the first one. Know the difference between a relational oil change versus a transmission change.
So,
what do you mean by that, Milo?
Yeah, so years ago, I remember sitting I was pastoring at a church that had multiple staff, and we were in a staff meeting, and we were I can't remember what we were talking about specifically, but it was related to relationships and marriages and trainings and things like that. And we were hosting an event, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to communicate it or what the topics were. And I think in that context, I just threw out, and I said, well, are we talking about an oil change here or a transmission change? And it was like, ooh, wait a minute. That's a really interesting way of thinking about this. Mm-hmm. Because what we realized was, depending on which of those two you're doing, dictates a lot of expectations. Mm-hmm. A lot of expectations. And so as we've been doing this series, we kind of want to conclude it with just kind of teasing out the difference between the two. So that we can accurately have you consider the difference. So in light of that, just kind of some next steps would be, make yourself aware. In fact, how do we say this? Plan on, just like you would with your car. Plan on periodic oil changes. And so, an oil change is something. There's an investment there, and there's an investment of time. And it's something you do consistently, depending on how much mileage you got and, how long you've been driving on those. But it's something you do on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And so here's some examples of what we mean by oil changes.
Mm-hmm. So oil changes could be a video series that you're watching together or in a small group. It could be attending a conference.
In the Navy, we have marriage enrichment retreats.
Mm-hmm,
that's in the that's in the category of oil changes.
Mm-hmm. We've done marriage retreats in the past. Books to read on marriage. There's a plethora online or at Christian bookstores you could read periodically, retreats to go to. So little things like that to keep fresh with.
Yeah. The investment is relatively low. There is an investment. Investment is low. It's rather quick, right? Just like an oil change. And it needs to be done. Mm-hmm. Like if you don't do the oil changes, over time, you're going to have problems. Mm-hmm. And so it's always easy to go, I know when, I've had the light come on in cars I've driven, oil change, it's really easy to go, I'll do that tomorrow. Nobody goes, I'll do that in 3 months because nobody would, that seems irresponsible. Mm-hmm. The next thing you know, 3 months has gone by. And so it's kind of good to have that periodic, okay, what does it look like? What are we reading? What are we attending? What are we watching that can kind of help make sure that things are staying fresh and
feed you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The second thing is, so if that's with oil changes, then you need to seek experts for the transmission change. And so the guy that I want to change my oil might not be the same guy I want to change my transmission. Transmission guys can usually change the oil, but not every oil guy can change transmissions. Mm-hmm. So there's a difference between the two. And there's a totally different type of investment, right? So if you need your transmission change, that's a lot more expensive. It's going to take longer. Your car's going to be, in the shop longer than if it was an oil change. So there's the scope of work is much larger. And there's some folks that I've known have attended a retreat or they've read a book or they're watching the series and they ask a transmission question in an oil change environment. Mm-hmm. But because they want something with minimal investment that requires very little time so that they can kind of get things rolling. And it's sort of like, nah, your expectations are in the wrong place. What your need is a transmission change, and you need to go seek some experts to help you out with that.
So some of those situations we got as questions. Other ones are just ones that we've dealt with personally with people. Yeah. And it's not something we're going to...
There are some questions that Bethany showed me that came in that I was like, that I think if we were to try to answer those in this environment, it'd be completely inappropriate. Just because we would be blindfolded, throwing a dart at a very specific target that we don't have the details on. And so it wouldn't be doing a good service.
So some of those topics that if you find yourself in this category are going to be more transmission changes where you're going to need to seek a professional or more professionally minded than just a 15-minute video on a series with us. Infidelity, spiritual strongholds, chronic anger, chronic sin, body image and how you think about yourself. Like, this stuff isn't going to go away in just a 15-minute, let's try something new.
Yeah. Because a lot of those issues are deeply nested in some ways of thinking, in some life choices, and they have massive collateral impact on a person's life. So you can't just go, we'll just do this and isolate it, because there's a lot of other stuff that has to get dealt with. So our encouragement is for those kind of things, seek out a professional marriage counselor. We have Fleet Family Services, who are incredibly qualified people in that sort of context. Seek out a chaplain. While chaplains aren't professional counselors, most of us have been through a tremendous amount of counseling courses and have walked with folks through things. So we have a good breadth of experience. Seek out those folks that, seek out an older couple. They might not have a placard or a degree, but there's a spiritual depth, there's a maturity, there's a patience that they can walk with you through some of these things, that you need to have some of those folks there. And what's the last thing we pointed out? Because I think this is important.
Find someone who is for you as a couple. Find someone who wants you two to make it. Find someone who has words to give both of you for encouragement and a next step forward.
Because I think it's easy for me to find people that are for me, or you to find people that are for you.
Girl, you should just tell him.
Yeah. Have you ever heard that?
Never, I won't say. But don't keep all your voices just people who are just yes for you. That isn't for you as a couple to make it.
Yeah.
Because you've made a commitment to someone for life. And don't give up and don't give in and don't settle for failure. But there's a way with Jesus through it.
And he's going to give you the power and the strength and the wisdom to be loyal, to be committed when it's hard. It's, with most of the couples I sit down with, one of the things I tell them is this is going to get harder before it gets easier, because we're going to kind of accurately assess where you're actually at versus maybe where you think you're at. And that can either be, in some ways, it can be encouraging because maybe things aren't as bad as you thought. Or it can be discouraging because maybe things aren't as awesome as you thought they were. So either way, you're going to have an accurate assessment, and then you're not, we can start making decisions based upon the truth. And so pulling those people around you that are for you together becomes really critical.
Well, thanks, Milo. It's been fun.
You bet, babe.
Yep. Hope you've enjoyed it. Goodbye.